Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Play Pause Rewind, our 61st episode. We are excited to be back once again. Niles, how have you been since the recording of our last episode?
Pretty good. It's graduation season, so there's a lot of change happening in the air. And, I just got to shout out to my girlfriend and, congratulations to her for finishing law school. Not a
Hooray!
small achievement. Yes.
Congrats. Yes, that is
How
huge.
about how about you, Dylan? How you been?
Oh, pretty good. I've been basically just playing on my Switch for the majority of the last 2 weeks, I would say. We'll talk about that more later in the show, but something came out on that a lot of people have been playing. I'm sure you guys know about that. But yeah, we'll talk about that later, but we are going to talk about Volume 2 of Star Wars Visions this
Ooh, baby.
week. Uh, we're not huge Fast and Furious people. It's fine, but I haven't seen one in a long time, so we're skipping Fast X and doing this
Yeah.
instead. Yeah, some of them are good, some of them I don't like. I haven't seen 8 or 9, so I didn't see them.
Yeah. I think the last one I watched was that one that we watched in the theater together where he busted out of the cast
Yeah.
just by flexing. That was legendary.
Yes.
I don't know how they could ever top that. So
that was 7, and that's the last one that Paul Walker was in because he died during production of that. And
right.
I think Fast and Furious is so interesting to me because it is the type of dumb schlock that I would normally love, but it just does not click for whatever reason. And I think it's just the amount of ego going on behind the scenes that just makes it all like not work for me.
Yeah, for sure. I get that. I think there's like other aspects to it too, like the reality breaking really quickly in those films where all of a sudden it's like, yo, he just got hit by a car and now he's standing back up and he's walking normally. Like,
Yeah.
that kind of bullshit. But
I have seen it
whatever.
described as like it's a live action anime, which in that context, I'm like, okay, that kind of works. But
Yeah,
I don't
I get
know.
that.
Just like hearing everything about behind the scenes with Vin Diesel and The Rock and how they can't be hit more than they hit other people. And it's just like the never. But
Drama.
yeah, enough of that. This is the second season of Lucasfilm's animated anthology series, Visions, which showcases short films from animation studios around the world. And once again, I think this format has yielded a really wide variety of stories set within the Star Wars universe as a framework. But we get 9 episodes and we get 9 very distinct short films. So yeah, what are some of your initial non-spoilery thoughts on Visions 2?
Yeah, I love it. We talked about the first season of Visions. Was that a year ago right now, or was that longer?
Something
I feel
like that.
But yeah, we reviewed that, the original first season. So if you are a fan of Visions, I encourage you to go check that out. But I think a lot of the same notes that I brought up in that, or that we brought up in that episode, kind of resonate here as well. They carry over because it is pretty much like the same format, like you were saying. It's
more of
9
that,
episodes. Yeah, it's more of that. It's more of what we're used to with the first season. And I think Visions, it just brings such a rich diversity to the oftentimes restricted world of Star Wars, or the confined world of Star Wars, to better put it. But like you were saying, we get to see these stories from around the world, these stories that are told from unique perspectives, different cultures, and they're coupled with these unique art styles and these diverse narrative directions. So I think it Visions gives creators an opportunity to break out of the typical tropes and formulas of Star Wars. Like, you still see that sprinkled through, like some of the lore, the technology, the force builders, the narrative tropes and everything, but it's very fresh. It feels very original. And I feel like the messages of these short films, they do resonate with a lot of people. And I think, at least for younger generations, I think there's a lot of stories from Volume 2 here that will resonate with them too.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are your thoughts, Dylan?
Yes, I love this like I love the first season, and it's kind of becoming clear to me that this is the type of storytelling philosophy I'd like to see applied to Star Wars as a whole a little bit more. Red Letter Media said this a long time ago, where like what you can do in Star Wars is very narrow in scope, right?
Yes.
It's like Jedi or smugglers or war, and that has been true for a long time, but when you approach it like Visions approaches it, I don't think that's as true. Uh, and I get the appeal of this really tightly interconnected canon. There are certain elements of that that are satisfying, of course.
Yes.
However, I would like to see Star Wars sometimes sort of become just a canvas for creators to no, like, sorry for this, but share their vision, just like let
Yeah.
them create. There are some basic framework things of Star Wars that are always going to be present, but let them do whatever they want with that. It doesn't have to be connected to anything at all. And as with season one, there are a few episodes here that I feel like could or should be jumping off points for like a feature film or a series of
Ooh, yes.
adventures. Like there were a couple in season one and there are a couple here, and it almost feels like this animation studio is like pitching a concept to Lucasfilm. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing some of these become feature films or I guess and or not and or and or just like have Visions episodes in the future be an hour or more sometimes if that's what the story calls for.
Oh yeah, I think that there were like a few episodes, like we'll get into in spoilers, but some episodes I think could have benefited from a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because these are really quick, like these are 15 to 20-minute episodes, and I think some of them could have gone even further. Like, yeah, got to 30 minutes even. Like that would
Yeah.
have been fine with me. That would give you even more time to like build out these worlds and really like breathe in them. But yeah, I would agree that overall I have very positive first impressions
Mm-hmm.
on these episodes, just like season one. And I remember from our season one review that there were some where I would just kind of said no, no, like on a few of them, like you're like 4 stars or so like that, like not even close to 10. But overall, I think I can be harsh sometimes, but not all the time. And I think with this season, I think overall it felt stronger because I
Mm-hmm.
think that they saw what resonated in the first season. They came back and they just kept going with what worked. I think the best, and I think that shows.
Right. But and that's something that's going to happen though when you allow for a more diverse creator driven approach. It's like not every story is going to work for you, but
Mm-hmm.
in a format like this that's okay because it's one part of this bigger whole. And that's really the case with Star Wars more generally, right? Like no almost no one likes
Yeah.
all of the movies, right? Everybody's got
Yes.
their ones they like and ones they don't. And whatever, like some of them are
Well, that's so
disappointing, but
true.
it means a
That's
lot of things to different people.
it. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that I'm glad you brought that up because I was just thinking that too. Of like, there's people who love the prequels, and there's so many people who hate the prequels,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's one of the things that's great about Visions is that you can pick and choose and find stories that resonate with you and that you relate to more than others because there's 18 of these original short stories now that are
Yeah.
set within the universe. They're self-contained, they're not canonical or anything as far as I can tell. They're
But it
just kind of
doesn't matter
fun.
if they are,
Yeah,
right?
it
It's
doesn't
like,
matter. Yeah.
yeah, like reading the story synopses before putting notes together, just because it's been a while since I watched it. I want a refresher. I'm like, it's saying the time periods in which all these stories were taking place. I'm like, oh, I didn't know this one was in the High
Oh.
Republic. Like, okay, I guess that's cool. But it
Yeah,
doesn't.
wow.
It's
I
like
didn't know that.
you can just watch. Well, it's not all of them. It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
the it's like you can watch and not have prior knowledge. It's like a more impressionist is not the right word, but it's like you get the ingredients of Star Wars sort of thrown in, and then it's just a story, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to go off your point earlier that kind of piggybacking off of Red Letter Media too a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, but I think one of the things that Star Wars suffers from is that it has these similar narrative structures, or these buckets of content or categories, where
Mm-hmm.
you have a story about a Sith or an Inquisitor hunting down a Force user, or it's another rescue operation, and those stories work fine, and there are some in this series that fall into those buckets of,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we've seen this story before. Um, can we get something new? and I think the series still does a very good job with that. But I think what I would like to see is like a story that's even more original, is kind of out there, and it's more of
Mhm.
like a challenge to creative directors, and even just like stuff that like you could watch it and it doesn't need a Sith or a Jedi or like a bunch of Star Wars technology to tell you that this is a Star Wars story.
Okay.
It could just be kind of set within the universe, and because the bad guy doesn't always need to be like an antagonist walking down the hallway with a red lightsaber coming to kill
Mhm.
you, kind of
Yeah.
deal. Um, there's this I haven't finished season 2 of the Bad Batch, but I just kind of want to reference it real quick
Mhm.
because there's an episode in it, I think it was episode 13, I looked it up beforehand, called The Flood.
Okay.
And basically the premise of the episode is our heroes, they go to this planet where it's just like an entire water planet with islands, and they're hanging out with this community, they're just chilling,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden a tsunami happens, and it's an island, so everyone's got to get to higher ground.
Right.
So that's the crux of the story, really, is just escaping from a natural disaster. And after I watched that episode, I thought to myself, wow, that's something we haven't seen in Star Wars before.
Yeah.
An actual story about a natural disaster. Like the antagonist of the story wasn't a Sith, it wasn't a Force user, it had nothing to do with the Force. It was
Mhm.
just, here's a community on an island, and all of a sudden they have to come together to escape this flood. And I think Visions echoes some of that here,
Mhm.
where they do branch out and they find new ways to explore the Star Wars universe. But I think like a challenge that they could even challenge themselves further to develop even better content for season 3 could just be, how couldn't you tell a story in the Star Wars universe without being too on the nose? How
Mhm.
can you like create a story without like making the antagonist just the Sith or
Or the
just the dark
Empire.
side? Yeah, or the Empire. Like
Mhm.
there's other ways that you can explore this universe and round it out a little bit more.
Yeah. And sometimes your villain can just be a ladder climbing incel, like in
Yeah.
anime.
Yep, that's fine too.
Yeah, but I think part of that is on Lucasfilm, but part of that is also on the fandom, because there
Mhm.
are lots of sections of the fandom who are actively cheering for Star Wars to get smaller in scope. It's like,
Hmm.
yay, Luke Skywalker again, Han Solo again. The Mandalorian is meeting all of the cartoon characters now. Oh my God, it's so fun. Our live action characters are becoming cartoon characters because they're not being played by people anymore, but by AI. Like
Yeah.
it's like we as fans need to celebrate when something is pushing the boundaries of what Star Wars is, even if it doesn't totally click for us. Like with
Yeah.
Visions, not all the episodes are going to click for you, and that's okay because they're pushing the boundaries and trying something new. And I think Lucasfilm, I've talked about this before, but like got scared when there was backlash to The Last Jedi, which pushed the
Yeah.
boundaries in like pretty small ways if you really think about it, and people lost their fucking minds and are still upset about it. So it's like, as fans, be adults about this a little bit. But Visions, I think, once again, I'm loving this show. I think it's really great. It's, like I said, what I want to see more of in Star Wars,
Mhm.
just creative ideas being thrown out there and celebrated. So
Yeah. And these creative ideas, they have some good messages to them, like some neat themes, and
mhm.
you know we'll get into that and then spoilers in just a second, but that's the great part about Star Wars, is there's always some good messaging behind them, and these are really original stories too, so we applaud them for that, and
Yep.
it's just nice to see a diversity of animation studios too.
True. You want to do spoilers?
Let's do it. Let's jump
All
on in.
right. So we may contain this episode by episode, or we might just jump around a little bit, but we can
Yeah.
start with the first episode, Sith, just called Sith, created by the studio El Guiri,
I think so.
and apparently means you're a tourist in Spanish. And you had
Yeah.
something here about their company website. What's this about?
Yeah, I was just researching them because I was curious about all these animation studios. So I just kind of looked them up and tried to find something that I knew them from, or
Mhm.
where they came from, or just anything about their general vibe. And yeah, so the studio is called El Guri, which on their website they say it means you're a tourist in Spanish. And I just really appreciate this messaging also that was on their website. I just pulled this quote for quote, or word for word, excuse me. The animation industry is a melting pot of talent from all over the world. Just take a look at the credits of your favorite film. So embrace your inner Guri and enjoy the magic of exploring new places and cultures. And I felt that quote just really embodied what Visions is all about. It's just kind of nice to see that studio just embracing that like multicultural angle of just, let's just, there's so many great stories out there across the world. Just enjoy it all. It's a melting pot. And I just appreciate that. But yeah, they're an award-winning animation company, and they've done all sorts of great work, but nothing that I really recognize. But this short here, The Sith, was directed by Rodrigo Blas, who's at that animation studio, and he's worked on a lot of big things. Like, I don't know how much of a role he had in these productions, but he's worked in them of like big animations like Ice Age and The Incredibles and Finding Nemo. So he's had some influence there, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, that is neat. And I just want to say one thing about that quote that you mentioned from their website, which I like a lot. And it reminded me a little bit of when I was doing study abroad, I took a class called Global Shakespeare. And we looked, and the point of the class was like looking at the way different cultures adapt Shakespeare plays into, their culture and their language. And because Visions now is bringing in animation studios from all across the world, we're sort of seeing how different cultures and people in those cultures interpret Star Wars. And it's sort of like going out from America to those cultures and then back to us as well. So we're getting to see Star Wars through all these different lenses that we didn't before, because no shade to George, obviously, but like he's one American white dude. And now we're getting to see it through all of these different eyes and perspectives. And I think that's really wonderful.
But absolutely it is.
Yeah. So this episode, it deals with Lola, who was a former Sith apprentice, and she's living alone with a little droid trying to make this painting, but the paint is like always turning to black sludge. It's not coming out the way she wants it to. And, but she's interrupted when her former master comes knocking. And wants to pick a fight. But the standout bit of this episode for me is the animation and the art direction is just stunning. I loved how they were willing to use blank space and not represent the locations of the episode objectively. Like at the start, everything is very white with only lines of color, but we see the like objective way it looks later in the episode, and it's just like a regular bunker and hangar and stuff like that. But the episode is very loose with its reality, and I loved that.
Yeah, I really like the art direction on this one. I think it's probably one of my favorites from the season. Honestly, it's just breathtaking, and the use of colors was magnificent. Yeah, just like you were talking about with the balance between the light tones and the dark tones, and how the dark tones just kind of like overtaking her, even when it's not what she wants to bring into her creative work, which is just really beautiful. And thematically, it works really well with the dark side and the light side kind of in conflict within her, and it was just great. But the combat's amazing. I love her little droid. I think it was called E2. He's just so funny, just going around, and like all the designs in these episodes are always so neat too, because we're so used to like the standard astromech or like BB-8 or like just battle droids, and then here we're getting to see like this very
like
unique
little crab
looking
droid thing.
Yeah, a little crab looking robot, and I think that's our droid, and I love that. It's so fun.
Yeah, and the villain of the episode looks really cool as well. The fight is great, but I like you put a note here about how it kind of represents gray Jedi to an extent, and I think that's sort of right, because it's like the light cannot exist without the dark, and we all have that darkness within us, right? And the Force is all about balance, and balance, as Luke says in The Last Jedi, like powerful light, powerful dark, like they're always going to exist side by side together, and it's just a part of who she is.
Yeah. Yeah, she found that balance in this episode. Like I think she was conflicted, and
Hmm.
that shows with the paint of like how it's bleeding in. The black is just kind of consuming everything, but when she has to confront her former master and deal with them, she does find that balance, and I think that's demonstrated with her dual colored lightsaber because it's like the
Yes.
one color, and then she flips out the other side. It's the colors like,
Hmm.
oh, cool, awesome. Um, it
And
was
it's
just
like
a
kind
very
of a
unique
curved
contrast.
blade too on the yellow side, which I thought was really
Oh
neat.
yeah, that was so
And
cool.
yeah.
I just
And,
love that. But yeah,
uh,
just like her art, she found that balance with you have to have the right kind of contrast. It
mhm.
can't just be all one color. I mean, it can be if it's in a modern art museum, but it's like you have to find that right balance of okay, if you're going to do like a black or a darker tone, you got to put some light on there to really add some accent or some
Yeah.
contrast. Um,
Yeah. Well, I love that the painting only comes into proper formation once she's reconciled that the darkness is just a part of who she is.
mhm.
Because the paint keeps turning dark because she's trying to hide the like dark side away and pretend it's not there and move forward. And it's like, no, this is your past and this is part of who you are. You have to embrace it and then confront it. Otherwise, it's always going to like corrupt you from the inside. And then once
Yeah,
she's able to make peace with that, the paint works as she wants it to, and she's able to move forward with her life and do something new. So
yeah,
really great, I think. Just
yeah. I think it's a pretty solid one. I think last time I gave number ratings to the episodes. So I probably won't do that this time as much. Maybe I will, who knows. But I was very positive on this episode.
uh-huh.
I definitely rate it like higher on the scale there. Yeah, really enjoyed this one.
Yeah. So episode 2, Screechers Reach from Studio Cartoon Saloon. Looks like they're a 5-time Academy Award winning studio. Got some Golden Globes.
Um,
Oh,
oh, it's nominated. Sorry, I should have made
oh,
that clear. I don't know if they've won any awards, but yeah, they've been
okay.
nominated multiple times for Academy Awards, Golden Globes, BAFTAs, and Emmys.
Hmm.
They're critically acclaimed Irish animation studio, and I'm not familiar with any of their work, honestly.
Hmm. Okay.
But I know like when my girlfriend, she kind of peeked over my shoulder when I was watching it. And she was like, I know this one. I think The Secret of the
Oh.
Kells. Like they're the person, like they're the studio that made that film and also films like Father's Dragon, Wolfwalkers,
Hmm.
Song of the Sea, The Breadwinner. So they've done a lot of very notable work, but yeah, very critically
Cool.
acclaimed cartoon saloon.
Oh yeah. And this one follows a young girl, Doll, and her friends as Doll wants to go investigate Screecher's Reach, a very dangerous, like legendary cave on this planet. And they work in like an industrial complex mine thing. They have pretty shitty lives. It seems like they're kids, they're doing child labor. Like it's not a
Yeah.
good situation. Um, and she's following this like necklace she has. It's sort of guiding her. And it's yeah, it's just a really sad, haunting episode to me. Uh,
Well, yeah, it really is. And what I really like about this episode is that for like the first half, or maybe even like first three quarters,
mhm.
it doesn't feel like a Star Wars story. It feels like a ghost story,
Yeah,
where it's
yeah.
just like kids going off because they heard a story about a ghost in the hills and they want to go
Hmm.
see if it's true. And then it turns out to be a Sith. Like once it
Right.
ignites that red lightsaber, it's like, holy shit, right? This is Star Wars. Like it
Yeah.
just kind of freaks me out.
But I thought it was interesting with the Sith in the cave. Like it, she is a threat and dangerous, but it almost feels like she's sad and desperate too. Like when the
Mm,
rock has fallen on her and she's just like wailing, like it feels almost like needless and pathetic that this whole
mm.
thing has happened. But the episode's a really like great exploration of how living in desperate and dire conditions can lead someone to turn to darkness as a means of escaping that life, right? Like if it's the only way out and
Hmm.
you hate your like situation so much, maybe you will turn to that, even if it's not morally like a good thing to do.
Yeah, because I think um, there is kind of this moral debate here because Dahl, wants to leave this planet and
Mhm.
search for a better life, But in doing so, she's going to abandon her friends, and it is kind of this moral debate internally of, well, what's more worth it, like spending this kind of this shitty-ish life with my
Hmm.
friends, or going off into the vast unknown and leaving behind everything I've ever known. You
Well,
know, it's
and selling your soul essentially
yes,
too. Like
yes.
she's going off to be a Sith apprentice. How much like death and destruction is she going to cause just because she wanted to get out? You know.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's like, if you were placed in a similar position, basically doing child labor,
Hmm.
maybe it's a slave camp, who knows? But it's child labor, so either way, it's fucked up.
Yep.
And you're working these long hours. You don't really have any prospects to leave
Hmm.
the planet and get out of the situation. I think if I was in that same position, I might be inclined to make the same decisions as her.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
I guess it's in a way it's like you can kind of think of it as the poverty draft for the military. Like a lot of
ooh,
really
yes.
impoverished people in America, like their only way they can see to climb out of poverty and have an economically more fulfilling life is to go into the military, and then they're shipped off overseas, and
Hmm.
it's not like our wars bring like happiness and hope abroad. It's a trail of death and destruction, and they come back and they're psychologically fucked forever because
Yeah,
like I didn't even think about that for the notes, but it does kind of remind me of that. It's like the poverty draft.
that is really smart. Actually, I didn't even think of that when I was watching this. I when I was looking online at some of the conversation around this episode, I saw a parallel that someone made
Hmm.
between Doll leaving her friends here in this episode to Anakin's departure in the Phantom Menace,
Oh,
which I
okay.
thought was very interesting because
Hmm.
this one she's going to go off and, I mean, there's a lot of parallel, I think, between those two characters. Like
Yep.
they get out of like this indentured servitude,
Hmm.
basically, through like this like kind of just stroke of luck, or just
Yeah.
like this encounter, and then it leads them down this path with the Force, where they do cause significant harm and destruction
Yeah.
later in life. So I thought that was very neat. I didn't pick up on that initially.
No, that's a good parallel. And it's just so sad too, like when her friends realize that she's leaving them and that like she put them in danger to do all of this and now she's just gonna leave them behind. It's
Yeah.
very upsetting. And you can just see the hurt in their faces as she's like saying goodbye from this massive ship that she's on. Cool design for that ship too. And for the
The,
Sith master that picks her up. Like very, very eerie, and it's like very light, bright light colors, even though it's a
mhm.
dark side persona. That's very interesting as well. So
Well, yeah, it kind of feels like a um like a veiled abductor or
mhm.
something, where it's just like, yeah, I look really like I'm innocent and everything, but I'm not,
Yeah.
kind of deal. But yeah, I loved uh, the art style in this episode, like the visual depiction of the Sith
Mhm.
in the cave, like how the darkness just kind of grows everywhere and it just kind of becomes like part of their being. I thought that was
Mhm.
so neat. And then when the light comes in, it's just like, oh, they're actually just this small little creature pinned underneath a rock. I thought that was
Yeah.
so cool. But yeah, the ship designed by the Sith is really neat too. And just like, yeah, the character designs, like how they were all animated, I thought was
Mhm.
really cool too.
Yeah.
So
Great
very
stuff.
high praise, I think, for this episode.
Yes. And moving on to episode 3, we've got The Stars, which is from Studio Punk Robot. It's a stop motion one. We didn't get any stop motion last season. So
No.
it's nice to see they're like branching out into different animation styles too. We follow two sisters, the last of their kind, at least as far as we're told, sort of fighting against the occupying Imperial forces. Their mother died leading a rebellion against the Empire on this planet, and they sort of um try to follow in her footsteps a little bit and or just survive. That's kind of the central conflict between the two sisters is one wants to fight and one wants to just live.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think this was a very interesting one. I mean, I've always been a fan of stop motion
Hmm.
animation ever since I was young, so I always appreciate seeing this kind of stuff featured. And with this too, the studio is Chilean based. They've
Okay.
done a lot of everything, so stop motion, CGI, a lot of different things. But yeah, Punk Robots Chilean based, and yeah, I think in this episode too, not to read too far into it, but because it is pretty on the nose, but it feels very much, like indigenous versus colonizer,
Okay.
dichotomy
Hmm.
there, where the empire's here and they're just pillaging and taking everything, plundering the resources, and then the
Yeah.
indigenous folks are just kind of struggling to get to survive. But yeah, I like the dynamic between the two sisters in this episode.
Hmm.
It feels earnest to me. Like these feel, I mean, I've yeah, I feel like it's very earnest. Like I was trying to make a comparison between my own siblings, but I'm like, well, it's not exactly apples to apples, but
No, not really. But it's I love that their conflict too. It's not like it's a totally understandable and reasonable conflict. Like the younger one is maybe a little bit more naive. It's like we can do this, we can fight, and the older one is it's like no, it's too much. We just have to keep our heads down and stay alive. And ultimately, they are put in a situation where they have to fight and they win, and it's very satisfying and cathartic. And they save their planet. They return the natural resources to where they should be. It's very sweet. And
yeah.
the character designs are really great as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, the fact that they made that like in stop motion, like that's a little thing that they like the masks like put on the characters to wear. That's so cool. Like the stop motion design for like all the Imperials, the
Hmm.
ATST. I thought that was really neat. Like even the facility design where they're like just collecting resources and they're having to go down the factory assembly line, kind of like an Attack of the Clones. I was
Yeah, it
getting
was
those
kind of
kinds
like
of
Attack of the Clones.
flashbooks. Yeah, flashbacks there. But yeah, I really liked all the design here. It's very fluid episode. I felt, even though it's stop motion, and I feel like we're getting a lot of episodes this season that have happy endings, which is kind of nice too.
Yeah, it is. Well, and I think that Vision season one did that mostly too. I think they were more uplifting than not for the most part, right?
Yeah,
But it's good. This is a show probably, like all Star Wars is meant to be kid friendly. We don't need to have it dark and dour all the time, but it is a very
yes.
hopeful season of this show. You know?
Yeah, and I'm all for it. I just remember like looking back on the last season. I think like there was at least like 2 episodes that had dark endings
Hmm.
where yeah, I think there was like one where a Jedi Padawan becomes the Sith apprentice by the end of the episode because he has to like save the woman he loves or something like that. I can't really remember
Oh,
if it was
that's right. He had the hat, right? He was like the
something like
cowboy
that.
Jedi. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think yeah, this season definitely feels a little bit more uplifting, and this episode in the stars encapsulated that for sure because of the ending. Like
Hmm.
I just feel like yeah, the life being kind of restored and like the connection with the force that you see through like um the gold animation through
Yeah.
the flower kind of mushroom things and on the rocks. I thought that was kind of cool, and how they were able to like explain so much through that little
Hmm.
animation I thought was really neat.
Yeah, it was a really organic way to deliver that exposition because the little girl is like drawing with it, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. And I like that the episode centers around this relatively small act of revolution against the Empire and like trying to follow in their mother's footsteps. And they think she's the star. So there's that nice moment. But it sort of plays into that idea that everyone has their own rebellion. Like this means different things to different people, and everybody's fighting back in their own way. Just, fun, solid little story.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I'm very positive on it for sure.
yeah, moving
And
on
then
to a even smaller, fun little story is "I Am Your Mother."
ah, I am your mother, Luke.
Oh my god, is this title a play on that?
Oh, I'm 100% sure it is.
It's so different.
I know it's a very, very tonally different from the
Yes.
Luke Vader fight of
Uh
episode
huh.
5.
Yeah. But yeah, you want to talk about this one a little bit?
Yeah. So it's essentially a mother and daughter enter into a big race among their comrades. I'm assuming this is like post
Race,
rebellion,
not.
or yeah,
It
during like
sounded
the
like you
star.
said rice, so just making sure.
Oh, the rice. Yeah, big rice.
Big rice.
No, it's a big race. And yeah, it's with the Starfighter Academy or something like that, but it's from Studio Aardman, and it's the same stop motion animation studio that we have to thank for Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run.
Wonderful stuff.
These legends, these amazing people. Like, I think just because they got this studio to like make a Star Wars film, I just kind of had instant nostalgia for it.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, I recognize that smile. That's from Wallace and Gromit.
Yeah,
like
there's a way that their characters are designed. It's like, oh, I know exactly who's making this. Like I've seen this before.
Yeah, it's adorable. Like, I just love their stop motion animation style, and they brought that kind of classic, the Wallace and Gromit charm, like British isms, where it's like, oh, Wensleydale, but not quite. It's got this. It's the same teeth animation. I think that's the main thing that's kind of coming through. But like, I feel like you get that similar, just British feeling, I suppose.
Yeah, but it is just about like it's race day at the school. There's a big race competition, and the daughter is kind of embarrassed by her mom and doesn't really want her showing up. And I guess they're more poor, and they have this big box ship. So she's like, I'm just gonna sit this one out. And then they end up, sort of coming together and rallying and winning the race through their ingenuity and their teamwork. And it's very sweet. And it's just an example of the breadth of stories that you can tell in Star Wars if you want to. Sometimes it can just be a mom and a daughter connecting and winning a race, because why not? What's wrong with that? Like, and it's like, not everything has to be the big epic adventure. Those are great and we love them, but do stuff like this sometimes.
Yeah, like, this is such a solid, fun little story of just, let's just win a race. Like, it's super relatable, because I think everyone has that moment of, or everyone's had to have those little embarrassments with their parents of like,
in school,
mom, please don't drop me off here in front of the school, or like, why are you doing this right now in front of a big crowd? So it's instantly relatable because of that. And then, yeah, like you're saying, it's just a great way, or it's a great example of how to build a story within the Star Wars universe without having to rely too much on common tropes or Star Wars isms. Like, yes, there are references to Wedge Antilles. Good for him. He got his big role managing the Starfighter Academy race.
Yeah. Well, and that's what we meme to. It's like, does this fit into canon or like continuity? I don't know. Did Wedge end up becoming like the principal of a academy on some planet and he's like kind of way out of it in a goofball? I don't know, probably not, but who gives a shit? He's here and it's funny.
Yeah, it's just fun. Like, yeah, you got those references to the Starfighters and I guess kind of pod racing to a certain extent. But like, there's no mention of the Force. There's no Jedi. We didn't need it. And it was a great Star Wars story. So yeah, I absolutely adore this one. Very high praise, I would say, for I Am Your Mother.
I agree. And I just adored that we've gotten claymation in Star Wars now. Like, yes, it's awesome. It's so good.
Yeah, I can't believe that. Yeah, we've already talked about 2 of the stop motion animations. There was another one, so it's just amazing that we got 3.
Yeah, and they're all very distinct from each other. None of them look like artistically the same at all.
Yeah, they're all distinct. They all kind of use different materials, and yeah, love them all.
Cool.
Shall we move on to the 5th one?
Good.
So yeah, the 5th one is called Journey to the Dark Head. From Studio Mir. It's a traditional anime style, and when I was doing research on this studio, they've done a lot of previous work on a lot of different anime projects. So like Legend of Korra, they did some animation on The Witcher, Nightmare of the Wolf. And there's a whole bunch of others, but these were a few that popped, or ones that I recognized, and then also Batman and Superman Battle of the Super Sons.
Oh my god.
Which I think I've seen clips from, and I don't know. I haven't seen it though, but they've done a whole lot of stuff and worked on a lot of different projects. But I really like this type of animation style. I thought it was really neat.
Yeah, I mean, just like finding out that they like did animation for Legend of Korra. It should get you excited to watch this anyway.
Yeah.
Just the animation for Tenzin alone in Legend of Korra is insane. I saw it broken down once, but he has like his regular outfit and then his cloak over it. And there's the one fight that he does. I won't spoil it or anything, but he's like, it's in season 3, and he has this really epic showdown with another character, and the animation on him is so complex. It's insane what they're able to pull off in that show. But,
Nice. I need to finish that series.
how far have you gotten in it? Did you
We're
just not
still
make
in
it through
season
season 2?
2.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
season
we're
2
still
is the weakest part of it. It's very
yeah.
very
We'll get
strange
through it.
season. Yeah. But yeah, this is sort of a team up movie of this like young the description online talks about how she became a mechanic, but I think she's still a monk in the temple, right? Like she's a monk in the temple, and I think she just uses a ship, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But she teams
I'm
up with
willing to
this
believe
young
that.
Jedi because basically they're like these prophetic monks who read like basically water droplets that kind of act like tea leaves, I guess, and see the future. And she wants to put a stop to this war between the Jedi and the Sith, and she thinks destroying the dark side head at the top of the mountain will do that. So she goes to the Jedi Council, is like, yo, help me out. And they pair her with this kid who had just lost his master. He kind of reminded me a little bit of Anakin Skywalker, like
Yeah.
angsty little teen Jedi. And so they go on this adventure to destroy this head. And I like it. I think it was cool.
Yeah. I like it too. And I think, yeah, the dynamic between the two of them is really strong.
Mhm.
Because yeah, you have these two younger protagonists, and I feel like they're both, you can feel this angst and frustration among them. Like I think
Mhm.
they're both frustrated with their teachers and the societies that they belong to. You can
Yeah.
kind of feel it ruminating off of them, and like the limitations that have been set on them
Mhm.
and the failings that they've seen so far in the,
Right.
like you could definitely feel that, like they felt like they had so much to prove and so much to do.
Yeah, and this was one of the episodes that I feel like could spin off into more stories. You know, I really
Mhm.
like the dynamic between those two leads, and I really felt like their journey was just beginning after this. This almost felt like it felt like a pilot to
Mm.
like a Saturday morning cartoon, you know?
Yeah, I see that. Well, I think even the water droplet tea leaf thing,
Mhm.
that's like a whole part of the lore that is just introduced here.
Yeah.
And I feel like yeah, like you're saying, you could just investigate that for like a whole like 6 episodes
Mhm.
with like these two doing their thing, like kind of being a crime solving duo or something. Like I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I thought they had a really great dynamic between the two of them. Uh,
I
the
love
one
that
thing that
they
I
like read the future, but they don't act on it. They just kind
yes.
of like collect and store knowledge of the future. And it it kind of, I forget what it's reminding me of something, but it's like, well, what's the point of this if you're not gonna help people with it? What am I thinking of? It's like that.
Um,
It's like, what's the point
not
of building
sure.
up all of this? Oh, I guess it's I think it's reminding me of the Brotherhood of Steel from Fallout. They like
Mm,
they preserve all this knowledge and hoard all these old world artifacts, but they stay holed up in their bunker, and they don't do anything with it. And
yeah,
ultimately in the lore of Fallout, like they they're well intentioned, but they, I think, mostly kind of die out, at least initially, until Bethesda started taking over and doing things. But I think that's what I was thinking of. It's like you're well intentioned, but what's the point of all this if you're not going to share it with the broader universe?
yeah, and I'm just thinking of it because I got Avatar on the mind now because of Legend of Korra. But there's the in the Last Airbender,
Mm-hmm.
there's that whole like library in the desert
Oh
that they
yeah.
go to, and they're trying to get this information, but the whole library is just accumulating knowledge for centuries,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not sharing it with anybody. So yeah, it is that question of like, okay, so why are we recording any of this if we're not going to use it for any practical purpose? And that's
Right.
the same thing with these water droplet leaf things. It's like, okay, we're recording this, but then she's reading the thing on the rock, and it's like, I see 3 shapes on here, and I'm pretty sure they're all people. Okay, that's great. Is there any more information that we can take out of that? Nope, that's it. Like, how
Hey,
is
well,
that going to help
she
anybody?
figures it out at the end. It works
Oh
out.
yes, yeah. But it's just like if every single reading is that vague,
Uh-huh.
it's like, what is the value here?
Yeah. Well, and I love the development that there is no dark head at the end, right? She realizes because she's like rushing to destroy the head while the Jedi apprentice kid is fighting the Sith who killed his master. And she's like about to destroy one. She realizes, oh, there's dark and light flowing through both of these. And that's a big part of like the Force, right? We talked about it in the Sith episode and with like the Luke's Island in Last Jedi. It's like they dark and light coexist because it has to be in balance, and it's out of
Yes.
balance if there are not both. So you cannot have the light without the dark, and she can't destroy it because then it would be destroying the balance of the Force. I think that was a really interesting little thing. But it's like this is why this series gets frustrating to me though, because I want more of these characters. I want to see them go on more adventures, and I don't think we're going to get that.
Yeah, well, I feel that same way about some characters from the first season. It's like, aha, never
Like the
gonna see
Ninth
these guys
Jedi.
again.
The Ninth Jedi. Remember the one where it's like all those evil Jedi, and she passes the test, and they go off on an adventure. It's like, what? Don't stop now.
Show me that one too. I
Show me
want to
the
see that one now. Yeah, right. Uh,
and that's not
yeah,
the case for all of these, right? Like,
yes,
like Screecher's Reach. I don't feel that about Screecher's Reach. I feel like that story concluded,
yes.
even though it ends in a similar way, like she's going off on a more adventures. I don't feel like that's teasing me for more, you know. But some of these, like Ninth Jedi and this one, yeah, they are. They're teasing me. Give me more.
Oh, I'd agree for sure. And I think with this one, the Journey to the Darkhead, one note that I felt, at least at the start of the episode, was that there was a lot of exposition really quick in this
Okay.
episode. It was just kind of thrown at us really quickly. So like I think this is one of those episodes that could have benefited from like a little bit, like 5 extra minutes or like a few extra minutes,
Okay.
just to give us a little bit more breathing room, and like you could slowly drip feed that information out a little bit
Yeah,
more
I can see that.
naturally. But overall, I thought the action was great. I really like the art style once again. So, I'd say I'm fairly positive on this one as well. I wouldn't say as much as like some of those other ones that we've already talked about, but I like this one.
Yeah. So now episode 6, The Spy Dancer, from Studio La Cachette, French. Oui, oui.
Ranch.
Yeah. So hand drawn, old fashioned animation, and they worked on Love, Death, and Robots. That's cool. And
Yeah, they've
Primal.
done a lot of stuff. Yeah, Primal, Love, Death, and Robots. There's some other stuff on their website.
Cool.
Can't remember all of it, but those were the ones that popped out at me. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the premise of this is basically there's this dancer and her daughter, I think. And
Yes. I think
it's
so.
like, yeah, and they're sort of using this like massive theater and these performances as a front for kind of gathering supplies and building a rebellion on sort of on their planet. And cool premise for a Star Wars movie. I think that was a neat idea. I love her dancing too. The way she flies around on all the
Yeah,
fabrics.
using the fabric to like throw herself around is really cool. Yeah, it's like it felt like the premise felt kind of something like similar to like Inglorious Bastards or something, like some
Good
kind
point. Yeah.
some kind of like subtle subterfuge, spy, sabotage,
Like the
story.
movie theater storyline in Inglourious
Yes,
Basterds.
yes,
right?
the
Yeah.
movie theater specifically. Yeah, not all of Inglorious Bastards.
That's
obviously.
that's a really good connection. I think that's cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I really liked this one, just like the animation in general. Like this kind of felt like a return to like the Disney Renaissance era a little bit with like
okay,
the
yeah, with the
animation
hand
style.
drawn, yeah.
Just because like of how beautifully it flowed. Like she just was mesmerizing. Like I just loved the way that the I'm forgetting her name, but the spy dancer, how she was moving across everything and like putting all the sensors on the soldiers to track them and their movements. I thought that was just really neat. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love because like the big twist of the episode is this Imperial commander or officer shows up and she thinks it's this guy who stole her son, right? And she breaks in her dance and she has this really traumatic response. And it's sort of like there's a chase and he's fighting her and it becomes clear that he's actually her son. he was brought up through the Imperial ranks and sort of like forced into this life. But she recognizes him at the end, and it kind of ends hinting that he's going to embrace his identity as part of this planet. He shows his horns and he kind of clenches his fist and maybe questioning his role in the Empire and the role of the Empire more generally. And I think that's a great little touch, a great conclusion to this little arc.
Yeah.
There's like hope for him.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, when I initially watched it, like I felt that the ending kind of tied it up too neatly,
Okay.
and wrapped like. But I feel like my opinions changed a little bit on that, because her son being the officer at the end, it is kind of a good tie-in because you get to see a little bit of like the mutilation on him and the stuff that he's had to go through in his upbringing. Like he was stolen from her as a kid, as a
Yeah.
baby, and then forced to raise up in this ideology where he's had to like practice the self-mutilation of getting rid of the horns and like having
Right.
to kind of forego his whole identity and turn on these civilians who were basically his family, but he didn't know that. It's like it just kind of speaks to that idea of how your perspective can get warped, regardless of which side of the battlefield you lie on.
Right. And how you, as part of a regime like the Empire or just, I guess, a fascist regime in general, like he's sort of, I guess, dehumanizing himself or has been dehumanized as a mechanism of survival and advancement in this cruel society that he's a part of. And maybe like desensitized himself to the horror of what he was doing. And he's remembering how like the atrocities he's committed at the end, and he wants to do better. And maybe, maybe he ends up changing sides and fighting for the good guys ultimately. But this is another example. It's like, I don't think I need more of that. I think I got the message from this. I feel like his change of heart at the end is just enough closure for me. I like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree. Like, I don't need much more of that story. This gave Star Wars the right cabaret treatment, and that was sufficient for me. I don't know if I need to go much further than what was given in this short film.
Yeah, and it's like that's why it's so interesting, though. It's like some of these work perfectly as short films, and some of them feel like the start of something bigger. And it's very interesting that we consistently get both throughout both seasons of the show.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, definitely pretty positive on episode 6. All right. Well, let's move on to the 7th one, The Bandits of Golan. This was a production from Studio 88 Pictures, and it seems like they're a pretty international studio. On their website, they have, it looks like, roots in Toronto, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad. So lots of different places, but you can kind of, this one feels very heavily Indian influenced. You see that a lot, I think, in the visual and the character designs and just everything going on in this little world. But yeah, this 88 Pictures, the only things that like I saw that I recognized were like Troll Hunters and Scoob that they worked on before. So definitely more kid focused, at least those ones.
Yeah, and art style wise, I did feel like this was the episode of this show most visually similar to like the Clone Wars. I thought a lot of the character designs, like the way their heads are shaped and stuff like that, was kind of reminiscent of that exaggerated style in Clone Wars. And it sort of plays with the concept from the Obi-Wan show about the Path, that network of people who kind of help hide and smuggle Jedi into hiding away from the Empire. But yeah, we basically follow these two siblings, the older brother and the younger sister, and he's trying to get her onto the path, basically, but they have to get to their first stop. And I think there's a lot of great tension with the need for him to protect this young child who doesn't really understand the danger she's in and is kind of a little careless because she's so young, and she just doesn't get that there are like these really serious, deadly consequences for being seen to do the stuff she's doing. And You get that a lot in different post-apocalyptic fiction with that has kid characters in it. It's like sometimes they just don't understand. Like in The Quiet Place, you know, when the little kid gets the fucking toy and he just like turns it on and it makes a bunch of sound. It like kind of reminded me of that a little bit.
Okay, I see that. Yeah, I liked the dynamic between the two siblings. I just think that this, in terms of like all the episodes this season, because I thought this was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Just compared to the rest of them, I think this is probably my least favorite episode.
Okay.
In the season. Kind of for several reasons. It was that first one that you mentioned with the animation style. It definitely felt akin
Mm-hmm.
to the classic like 3D animation style of the Clone Wars, but like dialed down a little bit.
Okay.
Like, and then like slowed down a little bit too. Like I felt like the character movements were just a little too slow for everything that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just for me, the animation just didn't feel right.
Okay.
I don't know how to explain it any better than that for me, but and for the most part, I think the story didn't bother me, but it ultimately kind of what I mentioned earlier boils down to the synopsis boils down to this young Jedi and her brother on the run from Inquisitors, basically,
Mm-hmm.
just trying
Yeah.
to get her to meet up with the rest of the Jedi. And I feel like this is a type of story structure that we've seen before. I can't exactly place it where I've seen it
Well,
before.
Rebels,
Yeah, Rebels
Jedi,
is a good
Fallen
one.
Order, like young
Yeah,
Jedi on the run from Inquisitors is kind of becoming a staple of Star Wars at this
yeah.
point.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, with these other stories that are branching on trying these new narrative directions,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Bandits of Golan maybe could have leaned into that a little bit
Okay.
more. But I do love the addition of this the Indian culture aesthetic into Star Wars. I liked like the just like all those kinds of inclusions
Mm-hmm.
of like the decorations, the furnishings in these like areas that they visited. I thought that was just neat. And this is like a culture and an area of the world that hasn't been touched before or explored in Star Wars. So it's just nice to see that representation on screen here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the core of this episode, the relationship between the brother and sister, really works and is
Yeah.
strong there because, like, you can tell the older brother is kind of getting frustrated with her a little bit and scared because she's like a little careless with her powers and puts him in danger, but there's love there and he
Mm-hmm.
understands like this is a little kid, she doesn't get it, and she just like so purely loves him. And the ending is very bittersweet. They have to separate because she has to go off and he can't come with her, but I think it works well. Anyway, it's I like it. I agree, it's not my favorite of the season, but it's a nice heartfelt little story.
Yeah.
And moving on to our next episode, we got The Pit, which is a very different type of Star Wars story from Studio Dart Shahito or Shtai. You say it.
Yeah, I didn't look up pronunciation beforehand, but it's a Japanese studio.
Ahio.
Ahio, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And from what I saw, they had previously, contributed to some work on Attack on Titan and
Cool.
Castlevania. So got some good notable pieces of work there. But The Pit, as a story,
Mm-hmm.
is focused on a group of prisoners or slaves. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they were just prisoners. But they're forced to dig on a planet to extract these kyber crystals from the ground. Once they reach the bottom of the shaft and it's empty,
Yep.
they're left there at the bottom of the hole they've dug and by the Empire. And there's only one brave prisoner who escapes to save
Mm-hmm.
everyone, and his name is Crux.
Yes. That little bit kind of reminded me of Dark Knight Rises just a bit when he's
Yes.
climbing out of the pit.
Yeah, I was expecting them to start chanting like that same thing from the movie.
God, that scene in Dark Knight Rises is so epic.
It fucks. Yeah.
Yeah, it does fuck. But I also love the time lapse of the pit getting deeper and the city in the distance expanding. Sort of this idea that this this wealthy civilization is built off the backs of slave labor, even though that's happening unbeknownst to the populace of the city. So like this immense wealth is being generated via exploitation, I thought was a pretty poignant theme. And you know, it was a nice, it's like he gets out, right? And he goes to
Mm-hmm.
the city and he's like, we're in this pit, we're down here, come help us, please. And then he gets thrown back in the pit and fucking dies, and it's devastating. And his little daughter has to see all that happen. But I think the episode's very powerful because hope and empathy like really win the day in the end, because the people of the city venture out and they discover the pit and they fight back against the empire. And there's no one hero in this situation, it's collective action. They all
Mm-hmm.
work together, and through their numbers and their collective power, they're able to overpower this superior military force and help the people out of the pit. I think it's really a beautiful story.
Yeah, I liked this one a lot, and I feel like I saw like some echoes of Andor a little bit in this one because of like how the prisoners or slaves, we'll just call them slaves, they were just left at the bottom of this grave, basically, that they dug for themselves. And the Empire's like, all right, it's your problem now. Like, we got what we needed for. It's just like this chronic mistreatment of human beings is so pervasive throughout the Empire. It's just, it blows me away whenever that shit happens. I mean, I'm not really surprised when it happens because it's the Empire. They're literally evil incarnate.
Yes.
But it's it just kind of felt like Andor, like when Andor is like working in the factory and it's just under these terrible conditions. And if you make one false move, then you're killed instantly. And even once you serve your term, you're not going to get out.
Right.
It's like you're just stuck in a cycle. And once you get to the end of the cycle, it's like, well, there's nowhere to go except stay right here.
Just to another floor.
Yeah.
But good episode, I think, overall. The story was very simple, but I think it's got a powerful message. So
yes, it felt very 99%, like we're all in this together, like kind of message. It's not like the well-off citizens versus the poor or anything like that. Like we're all just kind of collectively on the same page.
Yes. And our final episode, Au's song, Studio Triggerfish, leading animation studio in Africa. Apparently, this is another stop motion movie, and it's, oh my god, it's so cute. It's so adorable.
Yes. I love this one. I just watched it today. It's very cute. Yeah. So we follow the story of Au, who lives with her father on a planet filled with kyber crystals. More kyber crystals.
More kyber crystals, but so much more wholesome than the last one.
Yes, it's not just like slavery. It's just child labor, kind of, but not really.
well, I mean, they exist in a better time in the universe, right? It seems like the Jedi are at their height. It's a time of peace, and Au lives with her father on this planet, and his job is to go and mine kyber crystals, and then does he stabilize them, or does the Jedi?
The Jedi
does, yeah. So he finds them, and then she stabilizes them so they can be used. I guess they have like dark side in them, and they need to be sort of rehabilitated, I suppose.
Yeah, they need to be purified. And then as the story goes on, we find out that Au, our protagonist, has this great singing voice that tunes, or I guess has a harmony with the crystals that allows them to like purify the crystals on their own. So I thought it's just such a heartwarming story, honestly, all the way around. Like,
and I love the relationship is so pure.
Yes. The relationship is so awesome between her and her dad. Like, they understand each other so well, and like, yes, he sets limits on what they can do, but like, she's a kid, she's not going to follow those limits all the time.
Well, and he's just trying to keep her safe. Like, he's not overly controlling or anything. And even when she breaks the rules, like, he doesn't get mad at her just to get mad. It's like he's like scared for her safety more than anything. But ultimately, her song is what saves them, and she has to go off to be a Jedi and hone her power at the end. And it's very sad and bittersweet. But I love that all the characters are like little felt people too, like the material.
Yes.
There, it's
The felt design. That is so much work. And I acknowledge all the work you put into this, because felting is hard for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
But the art style, because of that felting and everything, was just impeccable. Like the story overall, I thought was great. I can't find like really anything to really complain about with it.
Mhm.
Like, yes, the narrative was a little simplistic, but I think it works for this short of a film.
Oh yeah.
And I like just the way that they designed the planet and everything with the felt. It felt like that there was great depth design
Mhm.
to everything. Like, so many of the shots, it felt like these were real places, like when she's jumping over the gaps and everything. I felt like she was actually jumping over something very high up, like the
Yeah.
heights felt real. So I thought the visual stop motion elements there were just phenomenal.
Mhm.
I Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a wonderful little film, and that's actually a mistake early writers make with short films. And it's like we've been saying repeatedly, a lot of these stories are pretty simple, but short film narrative needs to be simple. Like you really can't have too many elements going on because your movie is going to be 10 to 15 minutes long. And if you have too many things cooking in the oven, then none of them are going to get cooked to perfection, right? So, writing advice I got when writing a short film in college was like really try to stick to one or two things because you're not going to be able to explore anything more than that in very much depth. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a part of me, I think the only thing that I felt on the fence about with this one was Ao leaving at the end to
Hmm.
go with the Jedi and hone her powers. I wish that she stayed with her father, just because I felt that would have been more of a harmonious tone to end the episode on, where it's like, oh no, I've got such a good vibe with my dad, I'm just gonna stay here. And like, that fits with her having such a good harmony with the kyber crystals, but not a big
Yeah.
deal at
Well,
all.
I could see that ending working too. I could see her
Yeah,
staying being a fitting end to this narrative also.
yeah, very positive on it overall. I
Oh,
really
yeah.
like it, and just season 2 of Visions in general is a vision.
Yeah. It's very wonderful, and I want to see more Star Wars with this storytelling approach, and I want to see follow-ups of the ones that very clearly are set up to have follow-ups. Come on, give us more.
Yes, please more.
But yeah, but not until the writer's strike is done. Pay the writers
Yes.
first, and then they can do this. But you have any more thoughts on Visions?
Nope, that was it.
All right, let's move on to the next section of our show. Other stuff where we just talk about the other things that we're doing. Niles, what have you been reading, watching, playing?
Yeah, so we went out again to the Colorado Opera, and we
Very
saw
nice.
Turandot like about a week or two ago. It was good. So Turandot is a slightly problematic play or
Oh,
opera. I mean, a lot of these older ones are, because they're misogynistic and everything. This one particularly was, but there was also, so it's set in ancient Egypt, or
mm-hmm.
ancient China. Why did I say
Oh, okay.
Egypt? China.
The very different
And
places.
yeah, very, very different places. And the show, not this time, but back in the day, it used to be, white actors wearing
Mhm.
yellow face and stuff.
Oh,
Not great.
ooh.
But this one was a pretty good production. Just, I think that the female character did not have any agency at all, and that bothered me the entire time.
Oh,
So unfortunately, I didn't appreciate that part. Otherwise, phenomenal performances by all the singers and everything. Uh, just really great. We also started watching Poker Face
hell
on
yeah.
Peacock finally. Um, I did my classic move of starting at the third episode with my girlfriend. So
Why did you do that?
she had already started it, and she was like 2 episodes in, and she was like, I'm gonna watch the third one. I was like, I already kind of know the premise, so I'm gonna watch it with you.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I guess this is a show where that kind of works because every episode is its own thing. It's a very
exactly.
much like the structure of the season is very much like old network TV, where you get like a couple lore drops here and there, but within the structure of an episode of the week structure, you know?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna watch the first 2 episodes, but it's really cool. I really like it. Yeah, it's very neat, and Natasha Lyonne's just awesome as always. I love
Yes.
her.
Is the third episode the one with the barbecue pit?
Mhm.
Okay.
That one was
It's ridiculous.
ridiculous. Yes, that's the right word. The one
The
I was looking
way
for.
the way that plot is kicked into gear, like when it's revealed
Yes.
why it happens, it's so funny. Like it's just such an
He watched
offhanded.
Oakjaw.
Yeah, and she just hands it to him absentmindedly. It's like, oh yeah, this is good. Here, you should watch this.
Yeah, and then it makes him change his entire way of life.
Yep. Great,
So funny.
great show. But
Yeah, and then we started watching the 2010s. So I think I've talked about it before on this podcast, but it's a CNN series that they do, or it's a docu-series where they take every decade at a time and they talk about film, or they talk about TV, music,
Yeah.
politics, all these other kind of issues at the time. So you get a kind of, you learn about this decades. And so we just started the 2010s. So
boy.
it's like,
The
yeah,
fucking
I know. It's like
hellish decade.
they're already making that. Like, goddamn. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean,
So-
you got a lot of stuff to learn about there.
oh
we
yeah.
lived it,
And I
but-
mean, the TV episodes are always just fascinating. Just to learn about like what TV shows were like popular and how they changed the direction of entertainment. Some of these shows that they were talking about were much more recent, like Better Call Saul and
Game of Thrones.
Atlanta, like shows that are still airing too.
Oh, okay.
Or
yeah.
like shows that just ended, like Game of Thrones. It's like, okay, so, but I feel like my girlfriend made a good observation about it, where maybe not enough time has elapsed for us to have a more appropriate perspective on
Yeah, like
everything
not
from
a
the
full
2010s.
retrospective on it.
Yeah,
I get because it's like it just feels like due to COVID, like we kind of time traveled in a lot of ways.
I
Like
agree.
our existence in the 2020s so far has been so weird and different than it was before that it does feel like the 2010s just happened, even though
Right,
they didn't.
yeah.
We're almost half a decade out. Actually,
Yeah,
that's not true. We're halfway through half a decade. We're a quarter
Yeah.
decade out, but still.
Still fucking me up.
Yeah.
Still love it. But yeah, and then the other day I just downloaded Steam again and downloaded Age of Empires 2.
Oh my god.
Good old fashioned game from way back in the day, and just started playing that again the other day. So it's just a blast from the past.
Oh my god, man. I played that on like Windows. I don't even know if XP was out yet, but I played that as a kid. Like Age of
Oh,
Empires
yeah.
2. I loved that game. I learned
Me
so much
too.
about history from playing Age of Empires 2. Because you got what, like, like the Joan of Arc is in that one. El Cid. Oh god, it's such a fucking good game.
Yeah, I'm loving it. Yeah, it's such a trip down memory lane, so it's a blast. But that's it for me. What about you, Dylan? What have you been up to?
So keeping up with Succession, it has been a brilliant season of TV. It is so the episode not from last night, but the one before was just incredibly upsetting. I won't spoil why, but when you get to it, you'll be like, I don't feel good. And I do not like these people. They are bad people because the Roys are bad people, right? Like they're not good. But then the show is so good because you'll feel that one week and then you will be like crying on their behalf the next because it never ceases to show the humanity of these people as well. Like as bad as they are still human and they feel everything that everybody else feels. It's so good. The final episode of the series is coming out this coming weekend. So that's going to be crazy. I'm glad I caught up. I'm glad I caught up to watch it week to week because it's been great. I also started the new season of that Shadow and Bone show on Netflix. It's a fun enough YA fantasy story. I don't really understand the universe at all or what most of the characters are trying to do. And I have a weird problem with the show. Everyone is too clean cut and too pretty looking. And none of the main male characters have any sort of fucking facial hair or scarring at all. And it's like to the point of being distracting.
That is weird.
It is weird. And and they all have like modern haircuts and stuff too. But it's like, I think it's meant to appeal to. It's meant to showcase all the hot people being hot in this fantasy world, and I think it just takes it too far.
Yeah.
But it's I like it. I don't know if it's good, but I enjoy watching it. I've only watched like
Yeah.
2 episodes of it though. But I also had a feeling based on Breath of the Wild that I would want to watch some Studio Ghibli movies in preparation for something I was about to play. So I watched Princess Mononoke, which was a beautiful, wonderful film. I loved it so much. The
Uh,
other one I need to watch, I think, is Castle in the Sky next. For
uh,
the right. But I'm saving the main thing I've been doing for the last. I'm going to talk about it for a couple minutes. But Princess Mononoke was wonderful. I've also started reading House of Leaves, which I remember you reading in college and seeing how insane that book was printed and written. And I'm loving it so far. I'm like 90 pages in. I haven't gotten to the crazy, crazy shit yet, but it's very fascinating. It is dense and it is more difficult to read than a lot of the stuff I normally read, especially considering that I read at like 7:30 in the morning when I'm still a little bit tired. But I love it. It's so cool.
good.
It's
I'm glad you're
such a
liking it.
strange thriller book.
Yeah.
But the last thing I've been doing, this has been taking almost all of my waking hours that have not been dedicated to this podcast or applying for jobs. Is playing Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Holy shit, this game is a masterpiece. Like it's it's like when you're playing a game or watching or like experiencing any form of art, sometimes you have that moment where you're like, oh, I'm experiencing some of the best that this art form has to offer. That is what I feel in this game. I don't understand how they made this. It's it's like everything good about Breath of the Wild is here and they've improved upon even more. And the game is massive. It's like maybe 2.5 times the size of Breath of the Wild. And
Oh,
you're
damn.
yeah, yeah. And it's the same Hyrule map as Breath of the Wild, right? But a lot of the broad strokes are all the same, but as you're exploring it, like a lot of the little details have changed, so it still feels like you're exploring. But it's got this it accomplishes something really cool because your relationship to this land has changed. So like you're going back and revisiting these places and seeing where the characters from the last game have ended up, what they've been up to, and how they've grown because it's been a couple years. And it's just then the last one you're so alone, in this post-apocalyptic calamity, but now it's all like teeming with life and activity, and it just feels like the world has grown up and your
Yeah.
actions in the last game like made a difference. It's such a
Oh,
satisfying fucking thing. I uh, and when you
yeah.
like it's incredible. I'm excited for you to play it, and I think everybody who has a Switch should play it, but you should play Breath of the Wild first, I think, if you
Oh,
haven't.
yes. I
Um,
believe that. Yeah.
it is fully a sequel and just it's brilliant. It's so fucking good.
Yeah. I just ordered my copy online last
Nice.
night. I just got an email that was like, oh, it's shipped. So I'm very much looking forward to playing that because I just loved Breath of the Wild. And
It
I
will
was like,
consume you.
oh, I believe it. Yeah. I was 2 years, I think, late to Breath of the Wild. So I
Mhm.
don't want to be too late to Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, no, I was late to Breath of the Wild as well, just because I didn't get a Switch until much later. But yeah, and just I don't know. I can't say enough good things about it. And yeah, the frame rate isn't great. It runs at like 30 FPS and sometimes it drops to as low as 10 when there's a lot of shit going on. But the game is so good that you don't care. Like
Yeah. Well, that's
it's
high praise. High praise.
yeah. But that is gonna do it for our show this week. We will see you guys back here in 2 weeks for into Across the Spider-Verse. The new
Oh,
Spider-Verse
yes.
movie is coming out. Um But until that point, Niles, where can people find you online?
On Instagram at Niles Got No Styles. What about you, Dylan? Where can people follow you?
on Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at D-Day Movies, on YouTube at D-Day Movies, on Twitch at D-Day_movies. And you can also find both of us on our second channel for this, Play, Pause, Rewind videos. All of that is linked down in the description below. If you liked this and you want to see more, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on audio, leave us a 5-star review, send it to your friends and family who might be interested. That is how we grow, and we want to keep doing this more and more and more. We're thinking of doing another rewind in preparation for the new Indiana Jones. So we'll do Raiders of the Lost Ark for that. So look for that sometime in the next month. But yeah, we'll see you guys for Spider-Verse. Have a good 2 weeks. Peace out.
Thanks for listening.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.